Welcome back to another episode on the channel. Thanks for viewing in. In this one, I'm going to show you guys how I made this black walnut charcuterie board. Stick around. First step is going to be picking the slab that you want to use and the style of handle. Now you're going to take your template and then just trace your path around. Fire up that jigsaw. Now what you're going to want to do is try to run pretty close as you can to your line. You don't want to get too close because I'm going to show you why later in the video. Fire up the dust collection system, and we're going to run this through the planer. So as you can see, I have a sled that I use just out of MDF and then a couple pieces of cutoffs just to keep it in place. So we're just going to get the top nice and flat, run it through a couple times. The key is to take nice little thin passes. Now we're going to flip it over, and then we're going to run the bottom side through. Now this is just the way that I do this. I'm sure you guys could think up any other ways. So I'm just taking blue painter's tape, and you're going to line up the board, and then you're going to also put it on the template. And this is how we're going to get it stick together with some CA glue from Star Bond. On one side, you're going to lay down the glue. The other side, you're going to spray the adhesive. And then you're going to want to make sure you leave a little bit of a thin edge on the outside, so that way this router bit actually has something to bite into. Like I said earlier, this is why you're going to want to do that, so that way when you do put this template on, you're not going to have any issues. Now this is the best way that I've found to do this. You're going to take a drill bit, and then in the center section here, you're going to put a hole in each of the rounded corners, and you're going to drill that all the way through. After that, we're going to come over to our jigsaw, and you're just going to run a straight line into each of those holes, and then you're going to fight to get that little piece out through. Ask me how I know. Now we're going to head back over and pick up our router with our flush trim router bit, and we're going to go in here and we're going to carve out that inside section now, make it nice and flush. And after you pop off the template, this is what you're going to be left with, a nice beautiful handle. Next step is to debark this piece of black walnut. So what I like to use is a draw knife, and as you can see, I obviously do not have a vise set up yet, but that will be your best bet to keep this thing nice and steady. I just have it jammed in my sawhorses, which gets the job done. After using the draw knife, I'm going to take this flat wheel that's on my grinder, and we're going to take any more of this loose bit of bark that's off. For this board, I just want it to be a nice clean finish and not have any of that bark left over. Now for the end of this board, I'm going to give it a nice round edge, and I just took my handy dandy Home Depot bucket, gave it a nice circle with the jigsaw out, and cut along the lines. What I'm going to do now is just take 80 grit, and I'm just going to knock some of that loose stuff off, because as you can see, there's a nice void that ended up being discovered here, so we're going to have to take some epoxy and we're going to have to fill that in. Now if you do a lot of epoxy work, most likely you're going to have some tuck tape on hand. So all I'm going to do here is just cut a couple little strips, running along that edge where that void's at, and just basically make a dam. For this void, I chose hazelnut pigment from Black Diamond Pigments, just because it has a little bit of black, brown, basically matches the walnut pretty good. Nothing crazy that stands out. I just like that color a lot. And I'm also going to be using Ice Epoxy's Deep Cast, and that's going to fill that void, and it's going to cure in about 3 days. If you're enjoying this video so far, do me a big favor, and I would greatly appreciate it. Like, subscribe, even drop a comment. Let me know what you think of the video so far. As you can see, this didn't turn out as planned, but this is one of the joys of woodworking. You got to find a way to fix your mistakes, and this is how I'm going to fix this one. Just going to mix up some of that same pigment and some CA glue. And we're just going to fill that little bit in that dribbled out on the bottom and spray the accelerator on it. We're going to let this dry, and we're going to bring the sander out. We're going to start sanding this thing flush, get all that epoxy off the top. A little trick to keep your sandpaper clean. It's this block, which I honestly can't remember what it's called, but I'm going to find a link and put it in the description. It works really good when you're sanding this much epoxy off so it doesn't clog up your pads. So while I was starting this filming for this video, I actually received my 6-inch sander from Merca. I've been using the 5-inch for 2 years now. I love it, but for bigger projects, I just wanted to have the 6-inch on hand, and it's nice to also have a backup. But I'm going to start with 80 grit again. To seeing these edges on the handle, I'm going to take out my spindle sander. Try to get the rough stuff off from the jigsaw that left any imperfections and grooves in it. This is probably the easiest way. I put 80 grit on it. Now we're going to move back over to the router, and you're going to want to install a 1/4 inch round over bit. Well, at least I do. This is my preferred way for the finish on the handle. So I'm going to do that on the top and bottom. This just gives it a nice grip for when people are actually using the board. Plus, I think it looks the best. When I say handmade, I ain't lying. So we're just going to go in, touch up some of these corners here and those hard to get spots with the sandpaper. Just going to go in by hand. That way I don't mess up the edges. You could go in here with a Dremel bit, but I don't have any. So what I do use is these little wheels that I put on my drill. These help to get into those spaces also. Now, to achieve the best result for your end finish, you're going to blow this off with compressed air, and you're also going to want to wipe it down with isopropyl alcohol or mineral spirits after each grit that you sand through. Also, next, you're going to want to water pop this by spraying water, and what that does is raises the grain, and you're also going to get a sneak peek of what it's going to look like once you do get to the final step of putting oil on it, and it's looking pretty good already. For those of you wondering the sanding process that I use, I started on 80 grit for this board, and I ran this all the way up to 600, as you can see, and that is what we're going to be finishing with to get this a nice smooth finish. All right, so now we're on the home stretch here with completing this board. What I'm going to do now is take one of my logo coins, and I'm going to pick the placement on the board I want to inlay it into, and I'm going to trace around it. Now we're going to head over onto the drill press, and we're going to drill a hole in there for that to fit into. And I bond that to the wood with some CA glue and accelerator, and there you got it. All right, time to put finish on this board. As you can see, I'm using Odie's oil. This is a food safe finish, and I'm applying with a white woven pad. That is not going to scratch up the surface. And a little bit of this oil does go a long way, so you don't need to get crazy and throw a whole bunch down. Just a little bit, and then just buff it in. So you're going to do the top and bottom, all the sides, completely cover this thing. Now, I usually let it sit for about an hour or two, and then you're going to come back with a white terry cloth, and you're going to buff it off, and that's it. You got a nice, beautiful board.